The air in the first-class cabin of Apex Air Flight 712 was already thick with entitlement, a pressurized mix of expensive perfume and quiet condescension. For 17-year-old Marcus Monroe, it was just background noise. He was focused on the future, a future that started today with this flight from Chicago to Boston. But when the pilot, a man with a jaw set like concrete and eyes that dismissed him in a single glance, stood over his seat, one eye, and pointed a commanding finger, the future suddenly vanished. "Son!" The pilot's voice boomed, cutting through the cabin's hush. "I'm going to need you to move. This lady needs your seat." He wasn't asking. In that moment, Marcus had no idea he was a pawn in a game of prejudice and power, and that the pilot had just made a catastrophic mistake. He had just tried to intimidate the son of the one woman who could tear his entire world apart because she had literally built the ground he was standing on. The new global terminal at Chicago O'Hare International Airport was a cathedral of modern engineering. Sunlight streamed through a sweeping, undulating glass roof, dappling the polished terrazzo floors below. It was a space designed to inspire awe, to create a sense of seamless transition from the terrestrial to the ethereal. 17-year-old Marcus Monroe felt it. He ran a hand along a cool steel support beam, a genuine smile on his face. He wasn't just another passenger. He felt a connection to this place, a deep familial pride. His mother, Seraphina Monroe, was the visionary behind it all. She wasn't just a benefactor. She was the architect of its very existence, the CEO of Monroe Infrastructure, the firm that had wrestled this marvel of steel and glass into reality. Marcus was on his way to a prestigious summer program at MIT, an intensive course in architectural engineering that was the first major step toward following in his mother's colossal footsteps. He adjusted the strap of his worn leather satchel, a gift from his late father, and straightened his blazer. He didn't dress to impress. He dressed for the man he was aspiring to be. In his ears, noise-canceling headphones played not music, but a podcast on the material science behind self-healing concrete. Boarding for Apex Air Flight 712 to Boston had begun. As a first-class passenger, a graduation gift from his mom, he was one of the first to board. He found his seat 1A, the coveted spot at the very front. He settled in, pulling out his tablet to review schematics for his pre-program project. He was so engrossed in the complex lattice of a cantilever bridge design that he barely noticed the other passengers filtering in. The quiet hum of the cabin was pierced by a sharp, imperious voice. Excuse me. That's my seat." Marcus looked up. A woman in her late 50s, draped in a cream-colored Chanel suit and dripping with gold jewelry, stood in the aisle. Her name was Clarissa Davenport, and she carried herself with the unshakable certainty of someone who had never been told no. Marcus glanced at his ticket, then back at her. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but my boarding pass says 1A. He offered a polite, placating smile. "That's impossible," she scoffed, waving her own ticket in the air, as if it were a royal decree. "I'm always in 1A. My husband arranges it. There must be a mistake." A flight attendant, a young woman named Clara, with a harried but kind expression, hurried over. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" "Yes," Clarissa snapped, pointing at Marcus. "This boy is in my seat." The word boy was laced with a venom that was impossible to miss. Clara looked at Clarissa's ticket, then at Marcus's. Her professional smile tightened. "Ma'am, your ticket is for 2A, right across the aisle. Mr. Monroe is in the correct seat." "I don't want 2A," Clarissa declared, her voice rising. "The lighting is better on this side for my reading." He can move. It's no trouble." Marcus, who had dealt with this brand of casual arrogance before, simply shook his head. "With all due respect, ma'am, I'm quite settled here. I'm sure 2A is perfectly comfortable." He turned his attention back to his tablet, a clear but polite signal that the conversation was over. Clarissa Davenport was not used to being dismissed, especially not by a black teenager. Her face flushed a dangerous shade of red. "How dare you? Do you have any idea who I am?" "My husband is on the board of half the companies in this city." "Ma'am, please," Clara interjected, trying to de-escalate. "We need to keep the aisle clear for boarding." But the fire had been lit. Other passengers were now watching their faces a mixture of annoyance and intrigue. It was then that a second figure appeared, casting a literal shadow over the scene. Captain Robert Thorne was a man carved from granite and authority. In his crisp white pilot's uniform, with silver wings pinned to his chest and silver creeping at his temples, he radiated an aura of absolute command. He was ex-Air Force, a pilot who believed in chain-of-command discipline and the immediate quelling of any and all disruptions. He took one look at the scene, a flustered, wealthy-looking white woman and a young black man in designer headphones who hadn't immediately deferred to her. He didn't need any more information. He had already made his judgment. "What's the problem here?" His voice was a low baritone that cut through the cabin chatter. "Captain," Clarissa said, her tone shifting to that of a damsel in distress. "This young man is refusing to move from my preferred seat. He's being incredibly rude." Captain Thorne didn't look at Marcus's ticket. He didn't ask the flight attendant for a summary. He looked directly at Marcus, his eyes cold and appraising. He saw a black kid in a seat that likely cost more than a month of his first co-pilot's salary. He saw expensive headphones and a confident posture that he misinterpreted as defiance. "Son," Thorne said the word, dripping with paternalistic condescension. "You heard the lady. Let's not make a fuss. Grab your things and move to 2A. Marcus took off his headphones. The world rushed in, hostile and loud. "Captain, with all due respect, this is my assigned seat. I checked in, and my boarding pass confirms it." Thorne's jaw tightened. He was not accustomed to being questioned. "I'm not debating this with you. There are operational procedures. Sometimes we need to move passengers for weight and balance, or for crew discretion. Right now, my discretion is telling me you need to move." The lie was flimsy and insulting. The first-class cabin was half empty. Weight and balance were non-issues. This was about power. "I don't see why I'm the one who has to move," Marcus stated, his voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "I haven't done anything wrong." "You're disrupting the boarding process," Thorne countered, his voice getting louder. "You're creating a scene and delaying this flight. Now I am the captain of this aircraft, and my command is final. You will move to 2A, or you will be removed from my plane. It's your choice." The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Clara, the flight attendant, looked horrified. Other passengers were now openly filming with their phones. Marcus looked from the pilot's implacable face to Clarissa's smug smirk. He thought of his mother. She had taught him to stand his ground, to never shrink in the face of injustice. But she had also taught him to be smart, to choose his battles. Was this the hill to die on? He felt a surge of defiance. "No." Marcus said, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm not moving." Captain Thorne's face became a mask of fury. He had been challenged, his authority questioned in front of his passengers and crew. "That's it," he snarled. He keyed his radio. "Gate agent, this is Captain Thorne. I need security at the jet bridge. We have a non-compliant passenger for removal." The cabin fell silent. Clarissa Davenport had a triumphant gleam in her eye. Clara looked like she was about to be sick. Marcus Monroe sat perfectly still in seat 1A, his heart hammering against his ribs as the consequence of his defiance began its slow, inexorable march down the jet bridge. The walk of shame was a blur of hostile stares and hidden smirks. 2 airport security officers, their faces impassive, escorted Marcus off the plane as if he were a common criminal. He kept his head held high, his gaze fixed on the end of the jet bridge, refusing to give Clarissa Davenport, or Captain Thorne, the satisfaction of seeing him crumble. The moment the cabin door hissed shut behind him, the finality of it hit him. He was alone. The gate agent, a man named Henderson, whose name tag was slightly crooked, avoided his eyes. "You'll need to come with me to the customer service desk to discuss your options." He mumbled, his voice a monotone of practiced indifference. "My options?" Marcus asked, disbelief coloring his tone. "My only option was to be publicly humiliated and kicked off a flight I paid for because a woman wanted my window seat. The captain has final say over who flies on his aircraft." Henderson recited the words clearly, part of a script. He cited non-compliance with crew instructions. Marcus was led to the Apex Air customer service counter, a sterile, impersonal space designed to absorb and deflect anger. He was told his ticket would be rebooked on the next available flight, which was tomorrow afternoon. His first day at the MIT program, the orientation, the welcome dinner, all of it gone. The agent behind the counter offered a flimsy meal voucher as compensation. The insult was so profound, so dismissive of the damage done, that Marcus almost laughed. He pushed the voucher back across the counter. "No, thank you." He walked away, finding an empty seat in a deserted corner of the gate area. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a cold, hollow feeling of injustice. He pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking slightly. He had one call to make. He scrolled to Mum and pressed the button. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and full of energy. "Marcus, honey, are you in the air? I was just looking at the flight tracker." Tears pricked at the corners of Marcus's eyes, and he fought to keep his voice steady. "No, Mom. I'm still at O'Hare." Seraphina Monroe's tone shifted instantly. The maternal warmth was replaced by a sharp, focused concern. "What's wrong? Is the flight delayed? They kicked me off the plane," Marcus said, the words coming out in a rush. "A woman wanted my seat 1A. She made a scene and the pilot..." He sided with her. "He told me to move or get off. I didn't do anything wrong, Mom. I said no." Silence. For a moment, Marcus feared she was disappointed in him for causing trouble. But he knew his mother better than that. It wasn't the silence of disapproval. It was the silence of a great engine spooling up of immense power gathering itself. When she finally spoke, her voice was unnervingly calm, like the air before a hurricane. "Tell me everything, Marcus. Don't leave out a single detail. Give me names, what they said, who was there." Marcus recounted the entire sordid affair, from Clarissa Davenport's entitlement to Captain Thorne's fabricated weight and balance excuse, and the final humiliating escort off the plane. He described the smirks, the stares, the flight attendant's helpless expression. Seraphina listened without interruption. When he finished, she asked one simple question. "Which gate was it?" "C11, Marcus replied. "And where are you right now?" "Sitting near gate C15, at the big window overlooking the tarmac." "Stay exactly where you are," Seraphina commanded. Her voice was no longer calm. It was forged from steel. Do not talk to anyone from the airline. Do not accept anything from them. I'm on my way. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Mom, you don't have to. Marcus. She cut him off, and he could almost feel the force of her will through the phone. They did this to my son, in my terminal. They have absolutely no idea what they've just done. The line went dead. Marcus stared at his phone, a new feeling beginning to replace the humiliation a sense of awe. He had seen his mother command boardrooms and charm city councils, but he had a feeling he was about to see a side of Seraphina Monroe that few people ever witnessed. Meanwhile, in a black Cadillac Escalade speeding down the Kennedy Expressway, Seraphina Monroe was a study in controlled fury. She didn't shout. She didn't curse. She acted. Her first call was to her chief legal counsel, a man named William Sterling, no relation to the airline CEO, a fact that would soon become a source of delicious irony. "Bill, get the team ready," she said, her voice clipped. "Incident at O'Hare, Apex Air Flight 712 to Boston. My son was illegally removed from the flight. Racial profiling, discrimination, defamation. I want a full litigation package drafted within the hour. I want FAA regulations on passenger removal cross-referenced with Apex's own carriage contract. I want to know the name of the pilot, the flight crew, and the station manager. And get me the CEO's personal cell number." Her second call was to her chief of staff. "Audrey, cancel my afternoon. Clear the rest of the week. Contact Ben Carter at the New York Times. Tell him I have a story for him that will be trending globally by midnight. An exclusive." Ben Carter was a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist known for taking down corporate giants. Invoking his name was the equivalent of launching a nuclear warhead. As the Escalade swerved into the private access lane for the airport's executive offices, a lane she herself had designed, Seraphina felt the anger crystallize into a cold, hard diamond of purpose. They hadn't just insulted her son, they had defiled her creation. The terminal was a testament to her belief that infrastructure could elevate the human experience, that public spaces should be equitable and inspiring for everyone. Captain Thorne and his ilk had used her cathedral as a platform for petty prejudice. She was not just a billionaire mother coming to her son's defense. She was the creator coming to reclaim her creation from those who would defile it. And she was about to make Apex Air understand the monumental difference. Back on Flight 712, Captain Thorne was feeling smug. He'd put the troublemaker in his place, asserted his authority, and the flight was now ready for pushback only 25 minutes behind schedule. A minor inconvenience to ensure order. Clarissa Davenport was comfortably settled in seat 1A, occasionally glancing over at the now empty 2A with a satisfied smile. "Cabin secure for departure." Clara, the flight attendant, reported, her voice tight and professional, betraying none of her inner turmoil. "Roger," Thorne replied, reaching for the throttle. Just as his fingers made contact, the cockpit radio crackled to life. "Apex 712, hold position at the gate. I repeat, hold position. Do not push back." The voice belonged to the tower, but the command was unusual. Thorne keyed his mic. "Tower, this is Apex 712. We are fully boarded and ready for departure. What's the reason for the hold?" "Stand by, Captain. The hold comes directly from your airline station manager. He's on his way to the jet bridge now." Thorne swore under his breath. A station manager hold was serious. It meant something was wrong on the ground. He imagined a cargo manifest error or a last-minute maintenance check. It never occurred to him that the issue was the teenager he'd just kicked off the plane. Down in the terminal, Seraphina Monroe strode through the polished corridors of her own creation. She didn't rush. Her walk was a measured, deliberate display of purpose that made people unconsciously step out of her way. She bypassed the chaotic customer service counter and went straight to the discreetly marked door of the Apex Air Operations office. She entered without knocking. A handful of employees looked up in surprise. A portly man in a slightly too tight company blazer, his name tag identifying him as David Chen, the station manager, approached her. "Ma'am, can I help you? This is a restricted area." "My name is Seraphina Monroe," she said, her voice calm and level, yet it seemed to absorb all the ambient sound in the room. "My son Marcus Monroe was just removed from your Flight 712 by Captain Robert Thorne. I need an explanation." David Chen's demeanor was one of practiced corporate politeness. He recognized the expensive tailored suit and the air of importance. He assumed she was a high-value frequent flyer, someone to be managed carefully. "Ms. Monroe, I apologize for any inconvenience. I understand there was a disruption during boarding. As per policy, the captain has the final authority to ensure the safety and comfort of all passengers. Your son was non-compliant with a crew instruction." He was already mentally composing the apology email and calculating the number of bonus miles required to make this go away. Seraphina stared at him, her expression unreadable. "The crew instruction," she said slowly, "was to surrender his paid-for assigned seat to another passenger based on her whim. When he politely declined, your pilot manufactured a reason to have him forcibly removed. That's not policy, Mr. Chen. That's a textbook case for a civil rights lawsuit." Chen's professional smile faltered. This was more serious than he thought. "Well, that is a very serious allegation. The captain's report cited—" Seraphina held up a hand, silencing him. "I'm not interested in the captain's report, which I assure you is a work of fiction. I'm interested in a solution. The plane is to be held at the gate. My son is to be reboarded and given a personal apology by Captain Thorne in front of the other passengers. The woman who instigated the incident, Clarissa Davenport, is to be removed instead." Chen was aghast. "Ma'am, I can't do that. The flight is already delayed. We can't just remove a passenger and reboard another. It's a security nightmare, and I cannot overrule the captain's authority." "You can," Seraphina said, her voice dropping to a near whisper that was more menacing than any shout. "And you will." She took a small step closer. "Mr. Chen, do you see that support column over there, the one with the micro-truss engravings?" Confused by the non sequitur, Chen glanced over at the gleaming steel pillar. "Ah, yes. The steel alloy used has a tensile strength of over 550 megapascals. It was custom forged by a company in Germany that my firm acquired 2 years ago to ensure the project met our specifications. The smart glass in the ceiling automatically adjusts its tint based on the sun's angle and ambient light, saving the airport an estimated $1.2 million a year in energy costs. I know this because I hold the patent on the control system." She paused, letting the information settle. David Chen's face was beginning to pale as a terrifying realization dawned on him. "I am Seraphina Monroe," she repeated this time, with the full weight of her identity behind the words. "CEO of Monroe Infrastructure. We didn't just work on this terminal, Mr. Chen. We are the prime contractor. We built it. Every beam, every tile, every inch of this space you are standing in exists because my company put it here. My contracts with the Chicago Aviation Authority give me operational oversight on key infrastructure and vendor relations within this building. Apex Air's lease here. My signature is on the approval documents." David Chen looked as though he had been struck by lightning. The blood drained from his face. This wasn't a high-value customer. This was the woman who owned the ground beneath his feet, the queen of the castle. "So," Seraphina concluded, her voice now like ice, "you are going to call the tower and hold that plane. You are going to get on the radio and tell Captain Thorne that his final authority has just met a brick wall, and you are going to fix this now, or I will spend the next 5 years of my life making sure that Apex Air not only loses its gate leases here at O'Hare, but at every other airport my company has a hand in. And I assure you, Mr. Chen, we have a hand in a great many of them." Chen, trembling, fumbled for his radio. His voice was a choked squeak. "Apex 712, this is the station manager. Hold at the gate. The captain is to report to the jet bridge immediately. I repeat, the captain is to report to the jet bridge. Now." On the flight deck, Captain Thorne heard the command. It was so far outside of protocol, he was momentarily stunned. "Report to the jet bridge for what?" he demanded into the radio. "Just comply, Captain." Chen's panicked voice shot back. "You need to get out here." Thorne slammed the radio down. Annoyed and furious, he unbuckled himself. "Unbelievable," he muttered to his first officer. "Stay here. I'll go see what fresh hell this is." He strode out of the cockpit, down the short aisle and into the jet bridge. There, standing beside a ghostly white David Chen, was a woman of color whose face radiated a power and intensity he had never encountered before. Behind her, walking toward them from the gate, was the kid, the non-compliant passenger. Seraphina Monroe looked at the pilot, her eyes like chips of obsidian. "Captain Robert Thorne," she said, not as a question, but as a judgment. "We need to have a word." Captain Thorne stared at Seraphina Monroe, his mind struggling to process the scene. The station manager was sweating profusely. The kid he'd kicked off the plane was standing there, not looking cowed or defeated, but resolute. And this woman, she looked at him not with the pleading anger of a wronged passenger, but with the cold assessment of a superior officer inspecting a fatal flaw in her ranks. "There's been a misunderstanding." Thorne began falling back on his default setting of blustering authority. "This young man was disruptive. No." Seraphina cut him off, her voice sharp and precise. "There has been no misunderstanding. There has been a gross abuse of authority. You used your position to humiliate a child and enforce the prejudiced whims of another passenger. You lied about operational procedures. You delayed your own flight. And you did it all, it seems, because you made a snap judgment based on my son's appearance." Thorne bristled. "Now listen here, I don't know who you think you are. She's Seraphina Monroe, you idiot." David Chen finally hissed, his professional composure completely shattered. "She built the terminal. She's the CEO of Monroe Infrastructure." The name hit Thorne like a physical blow. Monroe Infrastructure. Even a pilot insulated in his cockpit world knew that name. They were giants. Their signs were on every major construction project in the country, from airports to bridges to stadiums. The new O'Hare terminal was their crown jewel. He felt a sudden, sickening lurch in his stomach. He had picked a fight in the lion's den, and the lioness herself had just appeared. His arrogance, a shield he had carried for decades, began to crack. But it did not shatter. Years of being the unquestioned authority in a metal tube at 35,000 feet died hard. That doesn't change the fact that as captain of this aircraft, my decisions regarding safety and security are final. Is that the hill you want to die on? Captain? Seraphina asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Because my son recorded your entire interaction, as did several other passengers, whose videos I imagine are right about now, starting to find their way onto the internet. My legal team is currently cross-referencing your final decision with FAA Section 91.3 on pilot responsibility and authority. It's a fascinating read. It grants you authority over the safe operation of the aircraft. It does not, however, grant you the right to act as a prejudiced arbiter in seating disputes. That captain is a flagrant violation of your carrier's own contract of carriage, not to mention federal anti-discrimination laws. Every word was a perfectly aimed shot. Thorne found himself speechless. He was a pilot, not a lawyer. He flew planes. He gave orders. He never had to justify them in this way. While this drama unfolded on the jet bridge, the digital world was exploding. A passenger in seat 3B, a tech blogger with a significant Twitter following, had uploaded his video 10 minutes ago. He hadn't caught the beginning, but he'd captured Thorne's ultimatum and Marcus's calm refusal, followed by the security escort. He'd tagged Apex Air and used the hashtags #flying while black and #Apex Air shame. The video spread like wildfire. It was retweeted by celebrities, activists, and news aggregators. On the ground, phones in the Apex Air corporate office began to ring incessantly. The social media team, accustomed to dealing with lost luggage complaints, was facing a tidal wave of public fury. They were drowning. Ben Carter, the reporter from the New York Times, received the tip from Seraphina's chief of staff. At first, he was skeptical, but a quick search of the hashtags confirmed the incident was real and rapidly going viral. Then came the follow-up email from Seraphina's office. Ms. Monroe is on site and will be issuing a statement. We can offer you an exclusive interview with her and her son. Carter dropped everything he was doing. This wasn't just a viral moment. This was a major story about race power and corporate accountability with a billionaire protagonist. He booked a crew. Back in the jet bridge, Seraphina delivered her terms again, this time with the chilling finality of a verdict. Here is what is going to happen, she said, addressing both Thorne and Chen. First, my son will be reboarded. Second, you, Captain Thorne, will make a public address to the passengers apologizing for the delay which you caused. You will not mention my son. You will state that there was a staff error that has now been rectified. Third, Ms. Clarissa Davenport will be removed from this flight. Her behavior was the catalyst for this entire event, and she will not be rewarded with a comfortable trip to Boston. We can't just kick off another passenger, Chen pleaded. She'll sue us. Let her, Seraphina said with a dismissive wave. My legal team will be happy to provide Apex with all the video evidence of her instigating the conflict. I imagine your lawyers can handle it from there. Or perhaps Mr. Davenport's position on all those boards makes her immune. The barb was aimed to sting, and it did. Thorne was trapped. His career was flashing before his eyes. Comply, and he would suffer the ultimate humiliation, his authority stripped away in front of his own crew. Refuse, and he would be fighting a war against a foe with limitless resources and unimpeachable justification. He chose what he thought was survival. Fine, he ground out through clenched teeth. Fine. He turned and strode back into the aircraft, his face a thundercloud. Seraphina put a calm hand on her son's shoulder. Go on, Marcus. Take your seat. Marcus walked back into the first-class cabin. The atmosphere was electric. Every eye was on him. He ignored them all, walked past a stunned and sputtering Clarissa Davenport, and sat down in seat 1A. He put his satchel down, took out his tablet, and placed his headphones over his ears. A perfect picture of calm he did not feel. Minutes later, a grim-faced Captain Thorne escorted a now shrieking Clarissa Davenport from the plane. She was protesting loudly about her husband, her lawyers, and the utter injustice of it all. But her words had lost their power. She was no longer a formidable socialite. She was just another disruption. Once she was gone, Thorne's voice came over the intercom, strained and robotic. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I'd like to apologize for the extended delay. There was a staff error regarding seating assignments that has now been rectified. We will be underway shortly." The plane finally pushed back from the gate nearly 2 hours late. But the story was far from over. It was just beginning. Seraphina Monroe wasn't looking for a simple victory. She was looking for systemic change. And Captain Thorne was about to learn that the karma for his actions wouldn't be a simple reprimand. It would be a complete and total dismantling of the world he had built for himself. The moment Flight 712 was wheels up, the crisis for Apex Air escalated from a raging fire into a full-blown corporate detonation. In the Houston headquarters of Apex Air, CEO Richard Sterling was in a board meeting discussing quarterly fuel hedging strategies when his phone, set to vibrate, began dancing across the polished mahogany table like a panicked insect. He ignored it. Then his CFO's phone did the same. Then the general counsel's. An aide slipped into the room and handed Sterling a note. It had 3 things on it. 1. Turned Apex Air shame. Number 1 trending topic worldwide. 2. Video link. 3. Seraphina Monroe. Sterling's blood ran cold. He knew the name. Everyone in the Fortune 500 knew the name. Monroe Infrastructure was not just a vendor. They were a kingmaker. They built the arenas, the transit hubs, the very foundations of modern commerce. To have Seraphina Monroe as an enemy was like declaring war on gravity. He tapped the video link under the table. He watched the clip of his senior-most pilot, a 30-year veteran, condescending to and then ejecting a teenager. He saw the raw prejudice, the abuse of power. He felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't a customer service issue. This was a brand-annihilating event. "Gentlemen," he said, standing abruptly, his voice strained. "We have a situation. Meeting adjourned." He rushed to his office, his communications chief already waiting, her face pale. The New York Times, CNN, and the Wall Street Journal have all called in the last 10 minutes. Ben Carter is running an exclusive with Monroe. It's scheduled to drop any second. Sterling's first instinct was damage control. Get our PR firm on the line. Draft a statement. Apologize for the inconvenience, reaffirm our commitment to diversity. Offer the young man 100,000 frequent flyer miles and a full refund. Sir, the comms chief said hesitantly, I don't think miles are going to work. This is Seraphina Monroe's son. The point hung in the air. You don't offer a gift card to a woman who could buy the entire company with her pocket change. Just then Sterling's private line rang. The caller ID read, William Sterling. His cousin, a high-powered litigator in Chicago. Richie, William said, his voice grim. You have a very, very big problem, and you need to listen to me very carefully. I know I saw the video. You don't know the half of it, Richie. I'm calling you as a courtesy before I file. My client is Seraphina Monroe. Richard Sterling felt the floor drop out from under him. His own cousin was her lawyer. This wasn't just business. It was a strategic, targeted attack. She's not looking for an apology, Richie, William continued. She's looking for blood. She alleges a pattern of discriminatory behavior at Apex, and she's claiming your pilot's actions created a hostile and dangerous environment, not just for her son, but for every minority passenger. She's not filing a lawsuit for damages yet. She's filing a formal petition with the FAA and the Department of Transportation, demanding a full-scale federal investigation into Apex Air's training protocols, hiring practices, and complaint history. She's using her company's status as a prime federal contractor to lend weight to it. She's aiming for your operating certificate. This was a corporate death sentence. An FAA investigation of that magnitude could ground fleets, trigger SEC investigations, and send the stock price into a nosedive from which it might never recover. What does she want? Sterling asked, his voice barely a whisper. She wants a revolution within your company, William said, and it starts with Captain Thorne. Meanwhile, Ben Carter's article hit the New York Times website. It was a masterpiece of investigative journalism. It had the viral video, an emotional yet dignified interview with Marcus, and powerful quotes from Seraphina. She wasn't portrayed as a vengeful billionaire, but as a deeply concerned mother and a civic leader horrified by the bigotry displayed within a public space she helped create. This isn't about one rude pilot, Seraphina was quoted. It's about a corporate culture that allows such prejudice to fester and be wielded as a weapon of authority. The trust between a passenger and a flight crew is sacred. That trust was broken today. Apex Air has a choice. Either they can radically reform their culture from the top down, or they will be held up as a case study in corporate negligence for a generation. The fallout was immediate and brutal. Apex Air's stock, which had been stable, plummeted in after-hours trading. Corporate partners began calling their brand safety clauses in sponsorship deals suddenly coming to mind. The pilots' union, which would normally circle the wagons, was suspiciously quiet. Even they could see that defending Thorne was indefensible and would tarnish their entire membership. Richard Sterling, cornered and desperate, placed a call to Seraphina Monroe directly. Her assistant patched him through. Ms. Monroe, Richard Sterling. I am beyond horrified. I want to personally apologize for what your son endured. I assure you Captain Thorne will be disciplined to the fullest extent. Seraphina's voice was like a glacier. Discipline is insufficient, Mr. Sterling. This is about accountability. Captain Thorne is a symptom of a disease within your organization. I want a cure. What do you want? He asked again this time, with the desperation of a man begging. I'm sending you a list of terms via my lawyer, she said. They are not negotiable. They will include the immediate and permanent termination of Robert Thorne, the revocation of his flight privileges with any partner airlines, a public unreserved apology from you on camera, and the establishment of a multi-million-dollar fund administered by a third party to finance a new mandatory implicit bias and de-escalation training program. A program that, by the way, my people will help design to ensure it has teeth. She paused. You have until the market opens tomorrow to agree. If you don't, my petition to the FAA goes public, and I will personally call the CEOs of the top 5 investment firms that hold your stock and explain to them why Apex Air is about to become the most toxic asset in their portfolio. The choice is yours, Mr. Sterling. She hung up. Richard Sterling stared at the silent phone. He had been given an ultimatum, not a negotiation. Seraphina Monroe wasn't just demanding he fire a pilot. She was demanding he rip out the rot in his company and rebuild it under her watchful eye. It was humiliating. It was costly. But the alternative he knew was complete and utter ruin. For Captain Robert Thorne, the descent into Boston Logan International Airport was the beginning of a descent into his own personal hell. The automated cockpit alerts chimed with their usual sterile calm. But for the first time in 30 years of flying, the sounds were a mocking counterpoint to the raging storm in his mind. He executed the landing with the muscle memory of a master craftsman, the plane kissing the runway with a smoothness that belied the pilot's inner turmoil. He was seething. He felt humiliated, emasculated, his authority usurped in a way he had never imagined possible. In his version of events, he was the wronged party, a commander who had merely maintained order, only to be railroaded by a powerful, overreactive woman and her coddled son. As he taxied toward the gate, he rehearsed the scathing report he would file against the station manager David Chen and the litany of complaints he would lodge about external interference with crew command. He was still Captain Robert Thorne. His record was impeccable. This incident, this aberration, would be smoothed over once the corporate machinery in Houston understood the full context. But there was no usual ground crew waiting on the tarmac. Instead, standing grimly under the terminal lights were two men in dark, expensive suits that were out of place amidst the baggage carts and fuel trucks. He recognized one of them as Mark Iverson, the Vice President of East Coast Operations for Apex Air. The other was a man he didn't know, whose severe expression suggested he was from legal or corporate security. This was not a standard debriefing. This was an interception. The moment the engine spooled down and the cabin door was opened, Iverson and the lawyer were on board, bypassing the disembarking passengers with an unnerving purpose. They entered the cockpit. "Robert," Iverson began, his voice devoid of any warmth. "You're to have no contact with the crew. You're grounded effective immediately pending a full investigation. Your return flight to Houston has been booked. You'll be flying in the main cabin." The final sentence was the most calculated insult. A senior captain, a king in his domain, would be flown home like any common passenger. "Grounded?" Thorne's voice was a mixture of disbelief and fury. "Mark, what is this? I was following protocol. We had a non-compliant passenger who was inciting a disruption. I de-escalated by removing the problem." The lawyer, a man named Peters, spoke for the first time, his voice as cold and flat as a legal document. "Captain Thorne, your de-escalation is the #1 trending story on every social media platform on the planet. Your problem was the only son of Seraphina Monroe. Our stock has already lost 9% in after-hours trading. The CEO is in emergency meetings with the board. This isn't an incident report, Captain. This is a multi-billion-dollar corporate crisis, and you are standing at its epicenter." The hard karma when it came was not a singular dramatic event. It was a meticulous, soul-crushing demolition executed with the precision of an engineer designing a controlled implosion. It was the complete and total dismantling of a man's world. The professional annihilation began the next day in a soulless, grey-walled conference room at Apex Air's Houston headquarters. Thorne sat across a vast table from the head of human resources, the company's general counsel, and Iverson. The termination letter was already waiting for him. "We find your actions on Flight 712 to constitute gross misconduct," the HR head read in a passionless monotone. "You violated Sections 14B and 21G of your employment contract, which explicitly forbid discrimination and require adherence to the company's code of conduct. Furthermore, your fabrication of a weight and balance issue constitutes a falsification of operational records. You created a hostile environment for a passenger and subsequently brought the company into global disrepute. Your employment with Apex Air is terminated for cause effective immediately." Thorne erupted. "For cause, this is a witch hunt. I have 30 years of unblemished service. I'll sue. I'll take this to the union and we'll own this company." The general counsel sighed, pushing a folder across the table. "Here is a preliminary copy of the evidence against you, Robert. It includes sworn, notarized statements from flight attendant Clara Jensen and 4 separate first-class passengers corroborating Mr. Monroe's version of events. It includes a frame-by-frame analysis of the passenger video, which shows you did not consult Ms. Jensen before engaging. It also includes a transcript of your call with the gate agent, in which no mention of weight and balance was ever made. And finally, it includes a preliminary petition to the FAA from Monroe Infrastructure's legal team, which is currently on hold, pending our swift and decisive action. The union has already been briefed. They will not be representing you." His next call was to Frank Gable, his union representative, and a man he'd flown with in his early days. Frank's voice was heavy with resignation. "Bob, I can't touch this. They have you dead to rights on video. The public outcry is massive. Our own membership is divided. The minority caucus is demanding we condemn your actions. If we fight then some soldados, we risk our credibility in the next round of contract negotiations for 3,000 other pilots. I'm sorry, Bob. You're on your own." The true death blow came 3 months later. The FAA, pressured by the high-profile nature of the case, and Seraphina's relentless legal team, had conducted a thorough review of Thorne's entire career. They found what Apex's internal reviews had always glossed over: a subtle but undeniable pattern. 7 complaints over 15 years, all filed by minority passengers, all involving disputes over authority, all summarily dismissed. In isolation, they were insignificant. Together, they formed the portrait of a man with a clear problem with authority, his own. The certified letter from the FAA arrived on a Tuesday morning. His hands trembled as he read the verdict. His airline transport pilot license was being suspended indefinitely, pending a mandatory and lengthy psychological re-evaluation and remedial training with no guarantee of reinstatement. The key phrase seared itself into his brain: a demonstrated lack of judgment and temperament required to safely and responsibly exercise the authority of pilot in command. His wings were clipped. His identity, forged over 3 decades in the sky, was erased by a single paragraph. He wasn't a pilot anymore. He was a case study. The social ruin was more insidious. He became a meme, his angry pointing face a shorthand for entitlement and prejudice. His personal information was leaked online: his address, his golf club membership, his ex-wife's contact information. All of it became public fodder. His neighbors in his manicured Houston suburb would cross the street to avoid him. His golf foursome suddenly had a permanent scheduling conflict. He was asked by the board of his homeowners association to keep a low profile. He was a pariah, the physical embodiment of a national scandal. The most painful cut came from his daughter, a college freshman who called him in tears, begging him to issue a public apology because she was being harassed on campus. He was no longer just a disgraced pilot. He was a source of shame for his own family. The catalyst's consequence was just as swift and merciless. Clarissa Davenport believed her husband's wealth and influence were an impenetrable shield. She was wrong. After being identified online, she was horrified to see her own name attached to hashtags like #FirstClassKaren. She immediately called her husband, demanding he sue everyone. But her husband, a man used to getting his way, found his calls were no longer being returned with the same alacrity. A senator he had donated heavily to was in session. A fellow board member from a major bank suddenly had to jump on another call. He finally got through to the chairman of the Chicago Museum of Fine Arts, where Clarissa was a proud trustee. "Charles, you need to put out a statement supporting Clarissa," he demanded. The chairman's voice was cold. "Arthur, I just got off the phone with the administrator of the Monroe Foundation. They are re-evaluating their 7-figure annual contribution to our new wing. They cited concerns about our board's commitment to community inclusivity. Read between the lines. She's out. Announce her resignation by the end of the day, or I will, and it will be much messier." Clarissa Davenport, who had built her identity on a foundation of social prestige, found that foundation had turned to dust. She was removed from the museum board, disinvited from charity galas, and ostracized from the very circles she had once ruled. Her husband's power could not compete with the focused, strategic wrath of Seraphina Monroe, whose influence was not just social, but structural. Finally, the corporate reconstruction was the public spectacle that cemented the victory. Apex Air CEO Richard Sterling, looking aged and beaten, stood before a sea of reporters. He didn't read from a teleprompter. He spoke from handwritten notes, his voice heavy with contrition. He apologized directly to Marcus Monroe for the abhorrent and inexcusable treatment he had received. He apologized to Seraphina Monroe and to the public. He announced the Apex Forward Initiative, a $25 million fund to establish a new industry-leading standard in implicit bias de-escalation and cultural sensitivity training. The program would be designed and audited by an independent council of ethics experts, a council that Seraphina Monroe had agreed to help assemble. It was a total surrender, a public flagellation. But it was also a masterstroke of survival. By embracing the reform demanded of them, Apex Air positioned itself not as a villain, but as a company willing to learn and grow, however painfully. The karma had come full circle. It hadn't just punished the guilty. It had forced the entire system around them to become demonstrably better. The echoes of that confrontation in Seat 1A would now reverberate in every Apex Air training room for years to come, a permanent lesson carved into the heart of the company by a mother's love and a billionaire's unyielding demand for justice. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a pilot and a passenger. It was a story about the hidden systems of power and prejudice that operate just beneath the surface of our everyday lives. It showed us how quickly a uniform or a title can be mistaken for moral authority, and how courage, even the quiet courage of a 17-year-old boy, can expose a deep-seated injustice. Marcus Monroe got on a different plane that evening, a private jet his mother chartered, and made it to his MIT program. But he arrived a different young man, with a newfound understanding that building a better world requires more than just steel and glass. It requires tearing down old structures of intolerance. Seraphina Monroe's actions remind us that true power isn't just about wealth. It's about the will to use your resources to demand accountability and forge a more just world. The karma that befell Captain Thorne and Clarissa Davenport wasn't magic. It was a direct consequence of their own actions, amplified by a system that was for once forced to be fair. If this story resonated with you and you believe in the power of accountability, please take a moment to hit that like button to help this story reach more people. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true stories of justice, consequence, and the hard-hitting karma that follows those who forget our shared humanity. Thank you for listening.